So, you want to create a shooter. Okay, what I have here is I just have my object. I've extruded the front end of this just so it has a little cannon-like effect, mostly just so I know where the front is. The first thing that we're going to do here, we do not use our actual object to shoot from. Remember, we have the situation with our radius. If we go here into physics, look at our radius, I can crank this radius up. What'll happen if we use our object to shoot, the projectile will hit our radius and will cause us to fly backward. It's called recoil. So I'm going to push this radius back in. So we're going to use something else to shoot from. That's why I usually extrude a piece of this so I'm not involved in that radius, the collision radius in there. What we're going to do is we're going to create an empty object. Empty objects are commonly used in Blender in many programs like this, and we use it for many things, but today we're going to create a shooter with it. So I'm going to set my cursor here somewhere in front. I'm going to go up here to Add, and I'm going to come down to Empty. Now you see it doesn't really look like anything. It looks like a big actually looks like a little cross in there with your Cartesian coordinates. I'm going to go and hit numpad 7 to get a top view so I can line this up pretty square. I'm going to roll this back over, look at it from the front. Looks pretty good. So you notice though I'm in the front pretty much. I want to keep it separate for right now just so you will see what I'm doing there. Now what we need to do next is we're going to actually create the projectile. So from here, we're working with layers down here. We've always been working in this first layer. All of your projects have been created in a single layer. We're going to choose a second layer. So just click on the next box. You'll see that everything is empty. Don't worry, if you go back to your first one, everything is there. But we're going to create our projectile in this second layer. So hit the empty. You can put your cursor wherever you want to, but we're going to create a projectile. So we're going to add mesh, and we're going to come down to UV sphere. I'm going to go ahead and give it some, I'm going to go ahead into materials, press new. We're going to give it some color. Let's make it red. I'm going to intensity all the way up. I'm also going to scale this down a bit. So S for scale, make it a bit smaller. And from here, we're going to name our projectile. Remember, like in materials, everything has to have a name. It has to have an association of some sort. So what we do is we come up here where we have all of our objects listed, and we'll scroll down where it says sphere, and I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to call it bullet. You can call yours whatever you want to, but I'm going to call it bullet. Now the way that I know this has been renamed, first off, down here where it talks about your object that's selected, it says bullet, and you notice down here on my logic bricks, it says bullet. If it says sphere or something other than what you've named it, you have not named it. So make sure you get it named because you're going to use that later. Now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my logic bricks. The first thing I'm going to do is add a sensor. The sensor I'm going to add is always, because I always want the projectile to come out. Then I'm going to add a typical AND controller. We're going to connect the two. Then I'm going to come over here to my actuator, and my actuator is going to be just a simple motion actuator. And I'll put, again, I'm working on my x-axis here. So I'll put 1. We'll see what 1 does. We may want to change that later. Connect this up, and that's all we need to do on this layer. Let's go back to our first layer. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and add logic bricks. Now we're not going to add any more logic bricks to our object. We're going to add the logic bricks to our empty object. So from here, let me line this up so you can see what's going on. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a sensor, and I'm going to add a keyboard sensor. What I'm going to do for the key for this keyboard is we're going to use the space bar. So I'm going to press, and you'll see space bar comes up. Then we're going to go ahead and add a typical controller, an AND controller, and we'll connect these two. Then the actuator, this is going to be a little different. We have always done motion actuators, but here we're going to edit object. We want to edit an object. So when we look at this, I'll make sure it's connected. The first thing we need to change in here is object. So when I click in here, it gives me a list of all of my objects, and you notice, there it is. Bullet is one of them. This is where naming conventions come in. You have to be able to find your object in here. So call it bullet. The timing on this, you will adjust this. I'm going to crank it up to 80 something just for an example. Now they're all connected, so the theory is when I hit play and hit my space bar, I get a projectile. How cool. Now the projectile does not come out where I want it to. It comes out of thin air, kind of, sort of. So let's change that. We can go in and change where our empty object is. All right, I'm almost there. Push it down a little bit. That looks pretty cool. Now the other thing we have to be careful of, we have to parent our empty object. Right now our empty object is just sitting there, and if I play and I want to shoot, but then I want to move, whoop, I'm shooting myself because the empty object is shooting. So we have to parent the two. So right mouse click on your empty object, then hold down your shift key and right mouse click on your shooter. From here, we'll come down to Object, Parent, Set, and Object. As soon as we click, you're going to get Set to Parent, and you want that object to set to Parent. So now, wherever that object goes, this object, it's parented to the shooter. So the theory is, now when I move, I can shoot wherever I want to. Now you notice it doesn't quite come out where we want to, and we've parented the object. Remember, we can still move the parented object. So we'll select our right mouse click on our shooter. I'm going to push it up a little bit. I'm going to push it back in a little bit. Hit P. Now it really looks like what I want it to look like. Now you have to be careful with this because remember, I have this piece extruded. I am well out of the range of my radius, my collision radius for this. If you do not do this, what can happen is, some people call it blowback, some of it is just a recoil. If your empty object is inside your radius of the object it's parented to, you'll actually shoot the projectile into the radius, the collision radius here, causing this to propel backward. So if every time you shoot this thing jumps backward, pull this out. Make sure you get your empty object away from that collision radius of the parented object. There you go. Happy shooting.